Hello and welcome to Media Snack live from New York.
And live from London.
Thanks for joining us again. If you are new to Media Snack, you're very welcome. This is a weekly show we do every same time every week on Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. UK and variations around the world, where David and I and guests explore some alternative perspectives and some of the big issues and trends in the global media industry. Please subscribe to be alerted and updated every time we do the show. You can follow along. This streams live across YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn and Twitch and various other platforms. Where you have functionality to add comments, please, we will see them live in the studio here. So if you have comments, I think there's some coming through already. And if you have questions for us, we can answer them live, or just say hi and we'll give you a shout out. Simple as that. So, mate, we are continuing our theme from a few episodes ago. And actually, it's been a theme for across 2020, which is what we've called our Media for Growth series. This idea, if you remember, our word of the year was simplify, but we really wanted ambitious marketers to start seeing media as a lever for growth. It's been a challenging year. So growth is, high on the agenda, but was high on the wish list, I think, for a lot of marketers. But we've still got kind of steps to go through on our Media for Growth program.
Yes.
And we'll come on a little bit later, actually, to share with you a workbook that we've created that we're distributing now for free to marketers keen on trying to, build their own operating models internally. And in the past, we'd looked at diagnostics, we'd looked at peer benchmarking, we'd looked at how to write a media vision. These are all previous episodes we'll link to down below. We looked at, what did we look at last time? We looked at, anyway, wherever we got to, we're now at what we call build or buy.
That's right.
Build or buy, that kind of critical junction. And there's lots of discussion about that. This is a really interesting topic because this is where that big looming word of in-housing comes, that shadow across the marketing or the media department. What are we in-housing? What capabilities do we need?
Absolutely right.
But that really only comes after quite a considered analysis of build or buy. So let's get into it. We do have a special guest due to join us later as well. You can tell us a bit about that as well when we get to it. So build or buy then, what is going on?
Very good. So this is actually one of my most favorite parts of our Media for Growth kind of journey with clients, because it teases out some really interesting kind of strategic objectives. If you remember, for the last 2 or 3 years, the story around in-housing has been part of the narrative within the industry on the client side, almost ad nauseum. And that was because some very high profile brands decided to sort of go all in on in-housing their programmatic buying. And there was a knee-jerk reaction often from other brands feeling as though they were missing out on a massive media kind of opportunity. And that couldn't have been actually, kind of worse for those kind of businesses. And so what we found with our Media for Growth program is that at the right stage of thinking around operating models, the really strategic decision making as to what to bring in-house and what to still outsource is a critical decision making kind of framework. But in order to enable that to happen most effectively, you need to have done a number of things. You need to have understood exactly where you sit within the media management kind of process, what your strengths and weaknesses are. You need to have articulated what a clear ambition for media is. And then you're able to start looking at the kind of core elements within the media management process and conduct a clear assessment as to which of those components you do actually want to sort of bring in-house, because they have to fulfill your overarching ambition for media. And so that's what we refer to as the kind of the build or buy process. We break down the media management process. We challenge our clients to define a very clear ambition for in-housing or not within the kind of key components. Then we help them make the right decisions as to which elements should be considered to be in-house and what scope should still remain external. and then we help them prioritize. And that's the prioritization is the bit that I think is kind of really interesting. What do you do now? What do you do next? And then what should you be starting to consider in the future? So really, it's not a tactical response to the changing market condition. It's far more strategic than that. Deciding what to build and what to buy is a key strategic decision-making process that should happen as part of an iterative journey.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, I mean, when we've been teasing this episode and promoting this episode this week, there's been a few people that have said comments. I think we called it "Should you in-house or outsource in 2020?" Of course, it's not a black and white decision, one or the other. This is the thing: the build or buy analysis breaks it down into chunks where you can decide. That test, is this something that we build internally, or do we buy externally? So only by breaking the function down can you really start to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. We'd have our special guest. Should we just say a quick hello?
Gerhard. There he is, Gerhard Lowe.
Good afternoon. Hi, Tom. Hi, David. Great to be here.
Gerhard, thank you for joining us today. We were slightly worried that we'd gone the wrong day for you, and that we were going to have to do justice to you without you actually being part of the show. But I'm delighted to see your smiling face on camera. So Gerhard, we're gonna ask you just to go backstage temporarily, and then we'll come in and start asking you some provocative questions about in-housing.
Absolutely happy to answer. Happy to be part of this show. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Okay, we'll speak to you soon. Excellent. Okay, well let's get to that as quickly as we can. Let's think about a couple of implications. So you've set out the scene for like the need for build or buy. What are the implications then of that? Okay, a few things. These are quick ones, I think. No rant today, because we just have to be very constructive with this. Build or buy. Every marketing department is having to go through these considerations, and it'd be interesting when we get to speak to Gerhard very shortly. Experiences of going through that process, because it's not just one person's decision. It has to be aligned across the team, and I think that's where we've seen it work most successfully in marketing departments, is where there's a real sense of consensus. Not just in the silo of a media team. We talk a lot about the media team having to try to influence and be influenced by adjacent functions internally.
That's right.
And the role of the media director is to facilitate those the bridges to those adjacent functions. So the role of a media director is actually spreading across lots of things. It's e-commerce, or it's retail, or it's data, and it's technology, and you have to be lots and lots of other things. And Gerhard is a brilliant exponent, actually, of navigating those different adjacent functions with leadership, but with consensus. It's very good at that. So the first thing is that it has to be based on consensus, and you have to align across the business. And as you'd mentioned in the introduction, a really good way to do that is to do some form of diagnostic up front, so that you have a very clear perspective of the current state of the media operation as is right now.
Yeah.
So that you can then when you design what the future state looks like, then you can start to decide which bits should sit internally and which bits we need external. We have one client that talks about this in a very interesting way, and it's language that we adopted as well, which is you have to think about the value of the task and versus the complexity of the task. And we tend to find that very high value tasks, which are not super complex, are suitable to be candidates for in-housing, and perhaps lower value tasks, or those that are very complex for the marketer to manage, maybe things like invoicing and billing and reconciliation, things like that. In media, it's an incredibly complex thing. Those are things which can be outsourced, or maybe should be considered for being outsourced. So there are some parameters, but you've got to do it with consensus. Silos don't work in media, and you can't have that internally. That's the first thing. Secondly, once you've done a build or buy analysis, the scope of work for your agency just writes itself. So
absolutely,
marketers will know one of the most, frankly, painful exercises you do, but you have to do because it's critically important, when we force teams to write scopes of work, it's like getting the worst homework ever. It's a big project because the business has to really think what it needs in terms of talent and resources from external partners, let's just say a media agency. So once you do the build or buy analysis, then we find that the scope of work is really simple because you've already decided what we're going to do and what needs to be done externally. And you can really precision engineer those scopes of your internal team versus external teams. And if you're using multiple external partners, make sure that those scopes are not leaving gaps in requirements and also not overlapping, which creates just as many problems as gaps. So that every external partner is very clear what they deliver as part of the overall operating model for media. So scope of work is a really important output. And the other thing that we find as a really positive implication of a build or buy analysis is it gives you, the media director, the stories to tell internally, upwards internally. And we talk a lot about this. If you're redesigning or rethinking your media operating model, internal communication is critical, and particularly upwards. And it gives, if you get it right, it gives you the opportunity as a media director to elevate your position actually within that marketing org or even within the corporate organization as a leader in media, because you have a specific idea of what you are going to do, what you're going to be, and very importantly, what you're not going to do. We talk a lot about strategy being committing to what you're not going to do. We're very sympathetic to a lot of media directors who say, I get questions from all over the business. I mean, it's amazing, but I'm a single point of knowledge sometimes that comes on any media related topic, right? Are we in the Super Bowl? Why are we in the Super Bowl? Why are we not in the Super Bowl? Should we be in the Super Bowl? Why are we in housing? When are we in housing? Everyone else is in housing. Why are we not doing this? And it's coming from, board level or C-suite level or these adjacent functions, and you kind of feel like you have to have an answer. Having completed a build or buy analysis, you have the answer because you say, this is what we're going to do now, this is what we're going to do in the next 12 months, and this is what comes later in the future. And just by taking control of that, I think you kind of elevate your own persona internally, and therefore the reputation of the media team.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Those are all the positive implications, I think. Nothing negative to say today. So let's think, what should marketers be doing then?
Okay. Well, I think we've covered a lot of this anyway in some of the kind of subtext that we've talked about. But if we were to define it further, it is understand what your clearly articulated ambition for media is. Okay, because that's the hook from which everything else begins to kind of fall. So define that ambition, make sure that that narrative is clearly articulated and aligned amongst the stakeholders internally. If you've done a diagnostic, then it's far easier then to begin to start illustrating the journey that you as a company need to go on in order to fulfill the true potential and opportunity of that media ambition. So the diagnostic piece is frankly very, very important. And once you've done that, then it's about articulating what the vision is for each of the components of the media management process. And there's 5 or 6 of them. It's not rocket science, but understanding whether there is any appetite or whether there is any real value of bringing strategy and planning, for example, within the organization, or that is something actually that you are better suited keeping within an outsourced kind of program. But having a very clear vision for what each of the component parts are will help provide that kind of direction of travel. And then the third and the final thing is understanding what, if any, are the barriers to success. So, what are the barriers that will prevent you from truly fulfilling that in-housing journey and extracting kind of the full value from in-housing? And the question that I'm going to ask Gerhard is actually how you begin to measure success when it comes to in-housing. So he's had lots of experiences in that.
He's
but
nodding.
What are the?
He's nodding.
He's nodding. Is he good? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm teeing him up for that one. But what are the barriers to success? And then how do you illustrate in a business case, in a business context within the organization, that in-housing journey is likely to extract value, generate value, and ultimately deliver growth for your business? So those are the key things that I would kind of focus as if I was a marketeer now.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Well, listen, we'll learn from the master in a minute. We thank you for that. So great advice. We're going to obviously speak with our special guest for this week, Gerhard Lowe, which will come up right after this break. So we're trying to be a bit more practical. We talk a lot in terms of theory, obviously, on Media Snack. But if you want to start actioning some of these things, and if you're considering the best operating model for your internal team, or you're a media director needing inspiration for ways to define what's next for your team, then you can go to our website and download a free 30-page Media for Growth workbook at idcoms.com/growth. And what you'll find there is that it gives you a step-by-step guide to defining your own media operating model with expert tips, templates, and ideas. So go to idcoms.com/growth and you can get started today. Good.
Well done. Very good. Nicely done, Mr. Denford. Now, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our guest today, Gerhard Lowe, who is the global media lead at Lindt, the global confectionery company. We've known Gerhard and worked with Gerhard for a number of years. Prior to joining Lindt, Gerhard was head of media at Deutsche Telekom across Europe, and was the architect of what to this day is probably considered the most progressive media operating model work that I've ever seen. And it was known as the Tetris model because it looked like a Tetris game. So Gerhard was one of the architects of that, and completed its implementation within Deutsche Telekom before deciding that his work was done, and that there were greater challenges within the chocolate business. But the reason that we wanted to get Gerhard in here, because a lot of that new operating model for Deutsche Telekom involved critical decision making as to which elements of the media management process Deutsche Telekom were going to bring in-house and build, or which they were going to continue to outsource. And so topical that Gerhard's going to come in and share his unique, I think, insight into this area. Gerhard.
Great. Thanks again. Thanks, David. Thanks, Tom.
How are you, Gerhard?
Have you moved?
I'm living two worlds in two countries and two cities. So at the moment, today I'm actually in Cologne in Germany, which is still my home, but I'm in transition to Zurich, Switzerland. I think the whole COVID crisis more or less put my move on hold. So I'm still in Germany, but I work in Zurich in Switzerland. Yes.
Good. Okay, like a true European. We missed that.
Brilliant, Gerhard. Well, listen, thank you for joining us today. And it's a hot topic, and I know there's a lot of people that are curious as to get your insight. I was talking to a number of other media leaders today and telling them that we were going to have this session on in-housing today. And when I mentioned your name, they were busy kind of clearing their diaries so that they could have this kind of session. But I know that you're now no longer with DTAG, and you're at Lindt. And so I'm going to ask you kind of broadly, generally, your perspective as a media leader within this kind of area, rather than having to put you in slightly awkward situations about previous jobs. But you know, you're a progressive media thinker. We all kind of know that. You championed a very sophisticated operating model solution in the past. But when it comes to in-housing, how do you begin to define a vision for in-housing within an organization? Yeah.
I think what I really like about what the two of you said before is that it is not about in-housing digital capabilities, right? So I think it is very clear that this discussion that is happening around in-housing seems to me that it's a completely wrong discussion. Why are people talking about in-housing search or in-housing display or in-housing programmatic? That's really not the point. I think the point around build or buy is really to go 2, 3, 5 levels up from that and say, how do we want to manage our media business, right? So it is a very, very different approach. It is a strategic approach to say, what do we want to do? And the journey that we had at Deutsche Telekom was very much about how do we manage this complexity that is media. So I think we don't need to talk about the complexity of media. Everyone knows it's complex and it's getting more complex. So I think there are two ways that one can go when you start talking about the complexity of media. You can either say, let's leave it, let someone else do it. Let's call it the buy part, right? So just let the complexity go. And then there's the other way to say, no, let's dive into that complexity. Let's really sort of put the finger in the wound, so to speak, and define which area of this complexity do we want more control of. And I'll never forget it. When we were at that stage, how scared people were of the word control, because all of a sudden the word control and media never really went together, right? It was always about having agency, good agencies, pitching agencies, consolidating, savings, all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden we talk about control, people saying, well, what does that mean? But that is really the point. You have to decide for your business as an advertiser, what part of the media process, let's say, the whole media scope, actually, do you want to have more control of? And I think that is the question that you need to start off with.
And Gerhard, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And how do you, because I think that's a brilliant question, right? And which bits do you want, but how do you begin to start answering that? How do you link the measures that you need to identify in order to make calculated strategic decisions on which components to bring in?
Yeah. I think the way that we did it at Deutsche Telekom, and it really took some time. So it's really, a lot of the work, and you said it earlier, David, there's a lot of work up front before you really get into the actual doing anything, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of analysis, and it's often good to get an external party involved, which we also had as well. So some kind of consultant that can help go through it. But you basically need to go through the whole thing first. You really need to understand how media works, what the value is, where the value is for the business, and what is the area that you think can bring your company the most value. And I think what bothers me about the discussions going on in the market about this insourcing of specific digital aspects is that I really think that's one of the fewest areas that most advertisers should insource. So if you ask me, I would say there are such few advertisers that really should be insourcing or building that part of the media value chain, because in the end it is a value chain. I think you need to ask what brings the most value to your business and to your core business, not to your media business. And I think that was a great exercise that we went through with Deutsche Telekom. We kept on saying we need to present this to the board. They're gonna, what is going to be the part where they say that adds value to our core business? What you want to insource the management of programmatic, that is so far from our core business as an advertiser. Control of certain processes. You talked about it, strategy, for example, more control of the strategy of how media should look like, of what the plan should look like, the media mix, the channels, the budget, dividing the budget into different channels, KPIs. That adds value to the business, not the buying of programmatic placements through technology. I mean, that's for a large advertiser, and I'm talking about most advertisers. Of course, there are always exceptions, guys that are direct to consumer, 100% digital businesses. I'm not talking about them. I'm just talking about most advertisers out there.
Yeah, and that's, Gerhard, that's, I think what I'm most interested in is now your perspective, having gone from a company like Deutsche Telekom, which was largely direct consumer relationships. You have contracts with users across Europe, and very data rich. A lot of those relationships are managed digitally.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot about your users and their patterns and what they do. You can just see it all. So there was a great depth of information within the business prior to this, and obviously part of that process was making some of those insights much more usable, and that was I think Tim's vision, wasn't it? It was like bring data into the business.
Exactly.
But now you're in a business where you're a CPG business where you probably don't have any, or maybe very little direct customer relationship. There's probably very little data feedback, I guess, that you're getting, and if there is, it's controlled by third parties.
Sure.
I know you're still, the dust is settling in Zurich, as you say. So, but how have you contrasted the different challenge that it might be at Lint, where you just you're not a direct business and you don't have the data to be able to make decisions? How would you approach that?
I think the fundamental question is still the same, right? So what I'm seeing in the business, and I'm very encouraged by it, is that question of how do we create order in this complexity? I always joke and say the devil is in the detail, and that is certainly the case with media, right? So you need to really get into the detail before you can really do anything or make any decisions. And I think there's a huge openness and willingness at Lint to really get into that detail and stick the finger in the wound. The wounds are a little bit different. So let's say the ambition is a completely different one, right? So it is not necessarily the data and the technology part that is driving, let's say, media transformation. I would definitely agree with you. It's not that at this moment, and I'm not saying it's not going to be that in a few months or a few years' time, but that is not the driving force. I think the driving force, as it was at Deutsche Telekom, is what do we want to control better? What do we want to understand better? Which part of the media value chain brings us the most value at Lint? And I think that's the same question. That's the same question we had at Telecom, and that's the same question I'm having at Lint as well. So there's a lot of similarities. Yes, maybe the end goal or the end result of the transformation will be a different one, but the basis is the same, and that is how do we understand it better? How do we create more, let's say, our own understanding of the complexity, and how do we make sense of it for ourselves? Yeah,
because control is the same ambition, isn't it? Whether you're, I mean, you paint a really good distinction there, and I think when everyone's got a bit hung up on the idea of in-housing and lots of activity that comes with that, and it sounds like an aggressive move, like we're taking things away from somebody else.
Exactly.
When you frame it around control, it implies that just seems like good practice, to have a little bit more of a perspective as the advertiser, where the money's going, and have a bit more influence stream on the data, that the insight, the strategy work. Degree.
Exactly, and I think that is what advertisers need. I don't think they need more hands-on keyboards. I always joke with some other advertisers where we talk about control. What kind of control are you talking about? Are you talking hands-on keyboard? So imagine that you're an advertiser and you have to sort of put it to your board that you have to appoint 10 people to run all your programmatic campaigns. And you're talking about 10 people hands-on keyboards. You just have to sort of imagine that board presentation, and then immediately whether it's right for your business or not. And I think that's the point. So define the control that you want, and then I would say for most advertisers, it is not about that hands-on keyboard control. It is about, do we have the right people inside our organization that understand the complexity of media? Do we have the right skills to really make sense of it? The strategy part, the data and technology part. These are the areas that we're all struggling with. And I'm not saying that I know everything, but that is the area where I would say that's where we need control. And that's where we need people and resources and expertise to build up. So if you say build a department at Lint, I would say, well, that would be the people that I want in the department. I want people that understand the strategy part, the data, and the technology part, bringing that all together, insights, making better decisions about how much budget do we need, where does the budget go, how to divide it within the channels. And then the next part, let's call it the planning part and the buying part. Sorry, I'm going to get the best people out there, and that's going to be in the form of an agency, isn't it?
Yeah. I just want to just explore for a second, Gerhard, the whole piece about measuring success, if you like. And what I found really interesting about your story, certainly taking the business case to the board. I mean, the board directors generally have a commercial imperative, right? That's where they see the value. The value, as they define it, is business growth. Sure. And they will make astute business operational decisions based on a compelling argument that you're going to fulfill some sort of growth target for them. How then, or perhaps it was a sensible decision to leave Deutsche Telekom once you'd implemented it. But how would you then begin to qualify the success of an in-housing strategy when you'd convinced the board to make a certain kind of decision? Are there any kind of thoughts and suggestions you can provide to us on that?
For sure. It's actually a very simple answer, and it's maybe not the answer that marketers and media people like to hear, but it needs to be a business case, right? It needs to be a financial business case on top of it. Unfortunately, guys, sorry, this is the bad news part of the talk. But I think what we found, or what we saw, certainly working in a very cross-functional team at Telecom, when we came up with this idea of changing the way we work with the new media operating model, as we call it. And I'm happy to say and hear that everyone talks about an operating model. When we started, no one even knew the word. So I think that's great that the industry is talking about that. And when we got this cross-functional team together, it became very clear that if we want to drive such a big change project, right? So we're talking about new way of working, you're talking about new resources, you're talking about new skills, everything. This doesn't come without certain costs, certainly, and it certainly doesn't come without getting top management approval. So it was very clear that we needed to go to the board, and we can't just paint pretty PowerPoint pictures. Of course we can, but that wouldn't really work. So we needed to do a full business case behind it. And in fact, it's a pity to shock everyone on the call, but we did 3 business cases. So that was quite tough, but we basically did one before we started. So basically when we were on the conceptual stage, this is what we want to do. We had to do a business case, basically more or less promising many benefits, including financial benefits. Then we did another case when we were basically done with building the model in terms of appointing the internal resources, but also the partners. So the Tetris model that you mentioned is a combination of build and buy. So that also needed a business case to compare with the initial business case, how far or how close we were. And then we did the third one really after about 18 months to say, did we achieve what we said in the second business case? So it was literally a three-level business case, and I only left after the third one, which was business
job done.
So I did see, exactly, it felt like a job done. So I think that's the sort of let's say, the hard part of this kind of transformation. Yes, in the end, it is about changing processes. It's about new people. It's probably about new partners as well. And Tom, I love the idea of talking about the scope of services, because that's where it all comes together, right? So like who does what and where the overlaps and the gaps are. That's definitely for sure. But you can't do that work unless you have top management buy-in and you have some freedom to move in terms of money. We're talking about new resources, perhaps new technologies. There's going to be incremental costs when you run this kind of build approach. Whatever it is, it's going to be an incremental cost, and that doesn't come just because people like you and they'll give you money. So there needs to be some business rigor behind it, and it's going to be a business case.
Because it's new money, isn't it? I mean, it's new budget. It has to be committed from somewhere. It can't be allocated. So
exactly
the need for the business case.
Exactly.
But you say that, as you said, I mean, that's the bad news is writing the business. For the media director watching that's saying, I love the idea of control. I love the idea of having a media operating model. I love the idea of understanding the role of the media function and how it plays to adjacent functions internally. I love the idea of raising, the profile of media and my team and me and the business.
Sure.
But I'm not, I'm not really excited by the idea of actually having to write a business case for this in case I found out some things about myself, because it makes you really have to think, like, what role do we play and what value do you add?
Exactly.
My question is, for those that are thinking, because we hear this a lot from media directors, say, I'd love to do this kind of stuff. I love the idea of this, but my CMO and board,
CFO,
CPO, and are so removed from the complexities of the media function that I don't even know where to start. The only thing that they talk about is when they see on the front page of the FT or the Wall Street Journal that advertising is riddled with fraud and corruption, and it's
exactly.
I don't want to go anywhere near that.
Sure, you need to make some very good friends in the finance department. That I can promise you. And I think it's something that I certainly found running the project. Well, I would call it a program really. At Deutsche Telekom is the friends you need in the different departments, and I think that was a great way to really bring so many people together in a cross-functional team, and it was a great team, and we were also acknowledged within the company as a great cross-functional team, and that was really special. And of course there was procurement in there. There's no question about it. Of course, you need some other units within that team, and finance is a crucial part. And there are people in your organization in finance that have a passion for marketing. You just have to sort of scratch a little bit to find them. But you need them because they need to help you firstly translate what you've got in your head onto paper and to Excel into a business case. And the other way around as well. They need you need them to help sell this into the financial organization, into the, let's say, the business part of the organization. But you're right, Tom. I think those kind of things also need to be addressed. The bad news or the risks. I mean, that's also what a business case is about, right? So we need to talk about the risks of this model not working, for example, or of what can go wrong. And there are many things that can go wrong. But I think this is what I really enjoyed as well, is about sort of saying let's really not make the scope bigger. I want to talk about that as well, because I liked your quote earlier about saying no to things. It's not about enlarging the scope, but it's certainly enlarging the team of influence for media. This is a great opportunity to educate the organization about media, redefine the value that media brings to the organization. And I think this is something that we often forget, or that is hard to communicate mostly, but this should be seen as an opportunity.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, Gerhard, you've become, very well. You were very well known across the community of media directors and your peers, and through your work with the trade bodies, particularly WFA, where I know you sit on the media board, and you led the media committee for a long time. But for those that are not familiar, for the few people watching and thinking, who's this clever guy? I've never heard of him. Gerhard really is a great champion for this kind of work. Doing that hard work. It was a hugely consuming 2 years for you, away from the day job. Such commitment to know and to build, and now to when we all look back and we look at the legacy that you kind of created at Deutsche Telekom with you and with the wider team. I just think there's a lot of media directors can learn and be inspired by lots of the things that you do and that you say, because I think it comes naturally to you. Being able to build those relationships across the business, critically important. Being able to communicate across the business,
selling.
Skill. Being able to keep all your external partners for the period of 2 years, when they really quite weren't sure where you were going with this and what was going to net out. Kept the support of all of the kind of external partners to the business. It's an incredibly impressive job that you did to conduct that orchestra and juggle at the same time. And
it was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it so much.
yeah. I think, you were particularly good at that. I think a lot of media directors think like that is a big undertaking. I don't know whether I've got the confidence. So for those, for those that want kind of more, Gerhard's contributed hugely to lots of resources, particularly through the WFA, as I said, that can help you through these things. Because I think you're an inspiration to a lot of other media directors, and hopefully you give them confidence to do it themselves.
Thank you. I think, I mean, of course, this is such a lame sentence, but of course I wasn't alone. So I think it's very important to say that there's, of course, a big team within the Deutsche Telekom group that worked on this. So that was really, really great. And of course, we also had external help. So that's also important to say, do not go at this alone. I think this is really an important part. So it doesn't, have to be, the very expensive top management consultants. It could be really the great boutique organizations like you. I hope you don't mind being called boutique, but I think you need some partners at your side. You need people to help you through this jungle, because there isn't, let's say, that much that's been done. I'd love to pick up on the WFA, if I may sort of, give them a few seconds of airtime on this call. So I did a great case study, because I did it myself. I can say it was great now. Of course, I did it with Matt Green from the WFA. So there's a case study on our journey on the media transformation at Deutsche Telekom. Some of the other advertisers, Philips also did recently a media transformation case study. So we were the two of the first case studies that were published, saying these were our transformation journeys. And there's a lot of tips in there, a lot of information. So I can also encourage other advertisers and people that are members of the WFA to look for those two case studies, because I think it was also worth it sort of to write it all down and saying, okay, this is what we did, and these are all the people that worked on it. And I'm happy to say that also, what I put in place there is continuing at Deutsche Telekom. So I'm still in regular contact with the colleagues, and I've been replaced by a colleague. So I think that's also the point, to say it's not just hanging on me. There needs to be, a team behind it, and there needs to be continuity, and it needs to be something that lasts as well. This is not as something that you're going to do in 6 months' time and then go, oh, this was a mistake, or this is going to cost the company money, or going to cost your reputation, go down the drain. So I think it's important to have partners, internal partners, external partners, to support you in the journey. And I really mean it when I say it was fun. How often in your career do you get the opportunity to sort of start with a clean piece of paper and write the big scary word control at the top of the paper and say, okay, well, guys, what is it going to be? What are we going to do? So that was really great, and I'm really looking forward also to my time at Lindt and Sprungli, the chocolate guys, to take them on a similar journey. We've already started with quite a big speed, and I think it's going to be a great journey there as well.
Well, Gerhard, on behalf of both Tom and I and the team at IDComms, we wish you the best of luck in your new chapter. We know that you're going to smash it. Thank you for taking the time today. Hugely insightful and incredibly helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Good luck with the move. Good. And
brilliant.
Gerhard mentioned some resources there. As always, we'll post those down below. I've read the Deutsche Telekom WFA case study, which is brilliant. I hadn't seen the Philips one, so we'll dig that one out and direct you to the WFA to get hold of those if you're a member. Brilliant. I'm in another masterclass, frankly, from a guest on how to be a media director. And Gerhard's one of the best. And if you don't know him, reach out, connect. He's incredibly generous with his thinking and his time. But I think he's busy moving cities right now. So we'll leave him for that for a while. I think that's it for Media Snack. As mentioned, we talked earlier about the workbook, the Media for Growth workbook. Now we're completing the Media for Growth series. But if you go to idcomms.com/growth, you can actually get all of the resources in one place and download now a workbook, which is a similar process actually that Gerhard's describing in terms of defining a media operating model. You can go and have a go at it yourself. during lockdown. It's a fun little project. So go and check that out. Have a good weekend. Thank you very much for watching Media Snack. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.